Yeah, Rajiv, we can go ahead now.
Okay, great. So kind of let me welcome all of you who are there in the webinar. So what I will do is in the next 2 minutes, I will set the context of the webinar, context about IncubateHub and our partnership with BlackStorm Consulting and Mubiin, to be very specific. So those of you who don't know about IncubateHub is Asia's largest open innovation platform. We work with more than 106 corporates, helping startups pitch to more than this 106 corporates. Sean, can you make others mute so that,
Yeah, they're joining in.
yeah. So IncubateHub has been working with more than 106 corporates, and we have been helping startups mostly in the emerging tech and deep tech space to work with corporates, do POCs, pilots, vendor contracts, join GTM. This is what we have been doing for the last 8 years now. And in the last 3 years alone, we have enabled contracts worth more than $13.6 million for our startup partners working with corporates. So that's kind of what IncubateHub does. And so this is a new initiative that IncubateHub has taken, which is to take global startups and Indian startups enter Southeast Asian market. So we are now doing market entry with our partners in the local geography to help startups enter those emerging markets where they are welcoming of global startups and primarily Indian startups. And in that initiative, I have been traveling in the Southeast Asia market for the last 2 months now, and we are very happy to have Mubiin from BlackStorm Consulting, who has become our partner for startups who want to enter Malaysia, specifically Malaysian market, and also Thailand, Singapore, and Taiwan. And Mubiin will talk more about it. But I like to kind of give a little background about Mubiin. So Mubiin has been very instrumental in building the Malaysian tech ecosystem, the corporate open innovation ecosystem, working with the government. And I can vouch for that because when I arrived in Malaysia in Kuala Lumpur, KL, he connected with me with 5 people right on the same day. All the investors, corporates, and I could have great meetings with them. So he's the guy. If you're looking at Malaysia, entering Malaysian market, understanding Malaysian market to be specific, but also the other Southeast Asian market. So thanks a lot, Mubiin, for joining in and kind of sharing your knowledge in this forum. So Mubiin, I kind of welcome you to kind of give a little introduction about yourself and BlackStorm and kind of take us through how to navigate the Southeast Asian market.
Got it. Hey, hi everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're located. Thank you, Rajiv, for that very nice introduction. It was a pleasure to have met you when you were in KL as well previously. So, to everyone on the call, just as an introduction of myself, hi, I am Mubiin. I am the country director for Malaysia for BlackStorm Consulting. So on today's topic, we will be going into the title of Navigating Southeast Asian Markets, a Startup's Guide to Successful Entry. So just to set a bit of context, the conversation today will be a bit more of a high-level conversation. Reason being that depending on the sectors, the conversation can skew towards differently, right? So I'll keep it high level first, but post the session itself, if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to have a conversation. All right. So just a bit of introduction on BlackStorm itself. We are a regional business scaler specializing in corporate strategy as well as market entry into Southeast Asia. We scale businesses by closing up strategic gaps that hinders companies from reaching their potentials. And our unique value proposition is mainly that we build the companies together with our clients, right? So it's not purely on a business consultancy basis as per the traditional concept, but we work hand in hand and on the ground with our clients. So a lot of people have been asking us why the name BlackStorm. It sounds like BlackRock, it sounds like Blackstone. So the reason being is when my partners founded the company, the name of the company itself stands behind a very simple meaning, which is black to be profitable and storm meaning to be aggressive, right? So whenever we help our clients enter the Southeast Asian market, the goal or the objective is for them to be to enter a market aggressively and to be profitable, right? And as per Rajiv has introduced earlier, our headquarters is in Singapore, but our offices are spread across Singapore, Thailand, Taiwan, as well as Malaysia. So essentially, BlackStorm Consulting, we do market entry into and also across Southeast Asia. But outside of Southeast Asia, also we have a network in Taiwan, Hong Kong, Korea, as well as New York, right? That's on the market entry portion. We also do corporate structure, corporate restructuring, as well as business scaling. So this is just a list of our experience and partners over the years. This is non-exhaustive. So zooming into the agenda today, there's 6 main items that I will be sharing, ranging from the business opportunities in Southeast Asia, navigating them, the common challenges, setting up business in Southeast Asia, some case studies, as well as opening for Q&A. So on the first topic itself, on the left side, you can see an overview map of Southeast Asia itself. So you see all the 9 countries there. And then at a glance, Southeast Asia have a population of more than 689 million as of 2023 in population as well as workforce. The GDP for the region stands at 3.66 trillion US dollars, the fifth world largest economy. In terms of digital economy size, we are looking at 300 billion US dollars, and we are expected to grow 5x in the span of 5 to 7 years. The internet penetration rate in Southeast Asia stands at more than 70%, with more than 400 million internet users. So you can compare this with the population size as well, right? Meaning that in terms of internet penetration, in terms of mobile users, we have a very big digitally savvy population. And then over the span of the next 5 to 10 years, in terms of forecast, we are looking at the digital economy to reach 1 trillion US dollars by 2030. And this is primarily driven by e-commerce, food delivery, online media, health, education, as well as financial technology. So there has been quite a lot of interest when it comes to coming into Southeast Asia. Reason being that Southeast Asia also provides a lot of advantages for businesses, right? Number one is via the growing population and middle class. So as I mentioned, we have a huge population and we have a rapidly expanding middle class with high purchasing power. So this translates to companies that expand into Southeast Asia are also looking at consumers or businesses that are able to purchase their products, right? Second is when it comes to renewable energy and sustainability, Southeast Asian countries are investing a lot in renewable energy as well as sustainability initiatives. The third one would be supportive government policies. So a lot of the government in Southeast Asia are heavily competing against each other, to be honest, to attract more and more tech companies to set up in their countries. And these initiatives and incentives ranges from policies, tax incentives, funding programs, as well as regulatory reforms, right? And then the next one would be the increasing of impact when it comes to tech-enabled disruptors. We have seen a lot of disruptions coming in from technology companies, especially when it comes to innovation, inclusion, and productivity growth in the 30 to 40% of the Southeast Asian economies. And this is mainly contributed by digital technology, turbocharging the traditional growth policies, right? And last but not least, why companies typically look at Southeast Asia as the next expansion point region is because Southeast Asia offsets the geopolitical winds. With the number of geopolitical tensions, wars going around, Southeast Asia has seen to be a neutral ground for a lot of the other regions. So some of the promising industries when it comes to Southeast Asia, I think manufacturing, a lot of people are aware that Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam has been some of the key drivers when it comes to manufacturing sector, right? Typically when it comes to semiconductor chips as well. The second one would be in terms of digital economy. I think I have covered this enough in terms of the GMV, in terms of the forecast, the expectation or the value of the growth in terms of digital economy in Southeast Asia. But what I want to highlight here is under the other section, whereby we have e-commerce, fintech, logistics, education, and healthcare. So this provides a lot of opportunities and avenue for companies outside of the region to actually come in and set up. Because as much as the competition is fierce, there also exists a lot of gaps that requires a lot of new companies, new solutions, and new products to come in to fill up these gaps. So initially, earlier, I shared the number of countries when it comes to Southeast Asia region, but the top three that we are focusing on, which is also why BlackStorm focuses on these three countries, Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand. And why these three, right? So Thailand, to be very frank, in terms of operational costs, it's very competitive. The investment policies and promotion of new industries by the government have been extremely supportive, as well as the growing income of the local consumer market. That's for Thailand. For Malaysia, the strategic ASEAN location has high cost competitiveness. The government incentives focus on high value industries, and the workforce of young and educated population with multiple language abilities is also a plus point when it comes to talent pipeline. Singapore, I think this one is a pretty well-known fact when it comes to Southeast Asia. They have very business-friendly policies and economic stability, a highly advanced tech infrastructure, as well as highly skilled workforce, as well as a developed connectivity as a trade, tech, and innovation hub, right? So zooming in a bit into Southeast Asia and the top three countries I mentioned earlier, tax incentives when it comes for businesses setting up in these countries obviously is a major consideration, right? So on this slide here, as you can see, we've laid out the tax incentive overview for Singapore, Malaysia, and also Thailand. And these are skewed more towards tech and also digital businesses, right? Ranging from tax systems, corporate income tax, the royalties, IP usages, management fees, individual incomes, normal taxes, as well as some other incentives, as well as initiatives that have been driven by the government to attract more FDIs into the countries. And when it comes to tech entrepreneurs or founders themselves, Southeast Asia has always been well known as a place to settle down or retire, because of the number one is the ease of doing business, and number two is typically food. So Singapore provides two types of passes, entry pass and also tech pass for tech entrepreneurs. Malaysia has the Malaysia Tech Entrepreneur Program, Malaysia Digital Nomad Visa, as well as the Foreign Knowledge Worker Program. And Thailand has a Smart Visa Program, which are essentially visas for tech entrepreneurs or tech founders to come into the country to set up their own and also to operate from the country itself. So moving on to the next agenda, when it comes to navigating the startup ecosystem in Southeast Asia. So as an overview, Southeast Asia is well known as an emerging startup hub. Back in 2021, the Southeast Asian startups reached a record $25.7 billion in funding, up 2.7x from the $9.4 billion in 2020, right? And the tech startups had a combined valuation of $344 billion in 2020 and anticipated that this will be tripled by 2025, which is in 2 years' time. The number of unicorns across the region has also increased substantially over the years. In fact, Malaysia itself had its very own unicorn sometime last year, right? And the number of startup investments across the region has increased substantially as well, providing more funding opportunities for startups to raise. So some of the key verticals in Southeast Asia when it comes to the startup ecosystem growth, as you can see here, health tech, fintech, e-commerce, and logistics had some of the highest funding raised across the region. These are mainly based on the opportunities or gaps within the countries itself, right? Health tech, as I mentioned earlier, due to the aging population, a lot of private and also public hospitals, health sectors are looking for new solutions to address this. When it comes to fintech, Southeast Asia primarily also still have a relatively high, I would say high, but moderate unbanked or underbanked population. So this provides an avenue for foreign companies to come in. E-commerce has always been known as an area of focus in Southeast Asia, primarily because of the high purchasing power of the consumers. And logistics is also, again, contributed and also a value add of e-commerce, hence why the opportunity arises there. So this slide is a bit wordy, but to keep it summarized, these are some of the key players in the Southeast Asia startup ecosystems, right? So ranging from government, committees, and conglomerates, as you can see across Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Indonesia, there exists a lot of entities or organizations that strongly support startup ecosystems, be it locally or internationally. So moving on to the next agenda will be the common challenges for businesses expanding into Southeast Asia. So some of the challenges are actually when it comes to number one, cultural differences. So Southeast Asia has more often than not been known to be a very diverse region. We have different languages, we have different cultures, different religions, and adapting to each of these is not exactly an easy task because the nuances of each culture is a bit different and it can be a bit sensitive depending on the product as well, right? Number two is regulatory environment. So across the region, when it comes to foreign investment, data privacy, labor laws, IPs, they vary greatly across Southeast Asia. And competition as well, brands also need to differentiate themselves from entrenched local players who have advantages, especially in the areas of distribution, relationships, as well as market knowledge. When it comes to infrastructure, again, it varies. Singapore is pretty much well known as a developed country in Southeast Asia, but for the rest of the countries, there are still certain parts of the of states or cities that are underdeveloped infrastructures like roads, electricity, internet access, which could cause supply chain and operation challenges. Language barriers, as I mentioned earlier, Southeast Asia primarily is English is accepted, but when it comes to proficiency, it's a different story, right? So, for example, if you go to Indonesia, they speak Indonesian. When you go to Thailand, they speak Thai. So, but Malaysia, for example, English is pretty much a native language to a lot of people here, right? Bureaucracy and corruption. So, like it or not, the truth of the fact is, corruption still exists across the region. Bureaucracy as well is a very tough challenge to get across, especially when it comes to dealing with government, right? And there's an extensive red tape around tasks like obtaining permits or licenses, hiring, importing taxes, and also taxes. The next one will be the shortage of skilled labor. So shortages of local management and staff with experience working with international companies and exposure to other business cultures are common in Southeast Asia. What this means is that it may be a challenge to recruit skilled labor that fits a global company's needs, typically also because when it comes to certain mindsets, certain way of doing things, there could be a conflict in terms of understanding. The next one, when it comes to challenges, would be the difficulty in finding decision makers. Because as I mentioned earlier, bureaucracy is one of the challenges, right? So finding the right decision makers can be a challenge, typically because these decision makers tend to be more hidden in Southeast Asia compared to other regions. Another one is when it comes to sales timeline. So sales timeline could be impacted primarily because finding the decision maker can be a challenge. Number two is also because in terms of business culture itself, right? For example, in Malaysia, what could take you 3 days in the US would take you 2 weeks, 3 weeks in Malaysia, for example. So having that expectation and setting down the expectation just to manage, that is really important. And the last one would be the management style. So management styles, as I mentioned earlier, it differs across the region, it differs around the world. So when you are hiring in a country in Southeast Asia, you also need to understand that cultural differences need to be understood and it needs to be adapted. All right, so the next agenda will be in terms of setting up business in Southeast Asia. So based on the World Bank, if you can see on the slide here, Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand holds the highest numbers when highest rating, right, when it comes to ease of doing business. Singapore stands at 86, Malaysia 82, and Thailand 80, as to compare with other countries such as Indonesia, Philippines, and so Vietnam. So, and the breakdown slide, ranging from starting a business, getting registers, consulting, focus on these three markets. Because when it comes to ease of doing business, when it comes to helping clients to set up businesses here, engaging with local stakeholders is much more easier. And when it comes to setting up a business in Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand, as you can see, in Singapore, typically it takes about 2 business days to start. Thailand, 6, and then Malaysia, about 18 days. But these are all based on estimation. The number may vary depending on the complication of the type of business that you are looking to set up as well. So in Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand, the minimum initial capital would be $1, Sing dollar in Singapore. Malaysia would be RM1, and Thailand, there's no requirement on this one. There is a flexibility in terms of foreign ownership of 100% in Singapore and Malaysia. However, in Thailand, at least 51% must be owned by a Thai legal entity. Similarly to directorship or shareholder, a minimum of 1 in Singapore and Malaysia, and 3 minimum individuals in Thailand. And a local resident director requirement in Singapore and Malaysia is required, but in Thailand, there is no restrictions. So I'll move on to the next slide. So under case studies, right? So typically what we'd like to share is why startups fail when it comes to expanding into a new country or into Southeast Asia in general. So just as an overview, typically why startups fail is because 1, they lack localization. Number 2, they are trying to scale too fast without understanding the landscape. Number 3 is they are not familiar in terms of how they can navigate around regulations. And then the last one is they have no local partners, meaning that they are trying to go into a specific market solely on their own. And what we have learned via working with our clients and our partners is that number 1, it is important to actually build a strong local partnership. Number 2 is to tailor offerings to local contexts to fit their appetite. The next one is to leverage on government programs to be seen as more involved and more supportive. And the last but not least is to be patient, as scaling regionally takes a lot of time. So the first case study I'd like to share is the story about Uber versus Grab in Southeast Asia. This might be something familiar to a lot of you. So Uber is very well known as an American MNC headquartered in San Fran that develops a ride-hailing app for smartphones. And Grab is the largest ride-hailing app in Southeast Asia, founded in 2012 and since expanded to become a super app offering a variety of other value-added services such as food, grocery, delivery, and payments, right? So the background here is that Uber and Grab typically entered the Southeast Asian market at almost the same time. And when Uber entered this Southeast Asian market, Grab was a very new company, and general opinion was that Uber would be the victor in the competition, right? But for some reason, Uber lost and Grab acquired Uber instead in Southeast Asia. So why did this happen and how did Grab win? So as I mentioned earlier, right, some of the areas that you need to understand when it comes to scaling into a country is that number 1, you need to localize. So localization includes localizing your marketing strategies, adapting to the local cultures and consumer behaviors. So in this instance, Grab actually adopted a lot of cash-based transactions to the unbanked and also underbanked population. And number 2 is customized services. So Grab adopted Grab Bike, right? Which is, and they call it F-hailing now, if I'm not mistaken. No, not right here, F-hailing, sorry. E-hailing, but more towards motorbikes, right? So this has proven to work very, very well in countries such as Indonesia, Thailand, where it's traffic congested. And they have also diversified their offerings to go into Grab Food and so Grab Express, right? They have also implemented safety initiatives. They have also expanded to include safety initiatives for their passengers, work with government to adhere to government regulations, providing a more holistic ecosystem by creating a super app, as well as working with a lot of local partners to improve on-ground support and also better service offerings. The next case study I would like to share is actually on Groupon. So Groupon, again, it's a well-known US company providing daily deals e-commerce platform that offers discounted products and services to consumers. They were founded back in 2008, and they grew to become one of the most successful e-commerce companies in the world. But back in 2012, Groupon actually entered Southeast Asia with the acquisition of SoDeal, another daily deals platform in the region. But the year after they exited Southeast Asia. So why did this happen, right? So number one is because of the competitive landscape in Southeast Asia itself. As I mentioned earlier, e-commerce market in Southeast Asia is extremely competitive, and there are a lot of established players who are able to offer more attractive deals and a wider selection of products. Number two is the market conditions. Back then, the e-commerce market in Southeast Asia was still in early stage, which translates to high level of CAC and low margins. So Groupon was not able to generate enough revenue to offset the costs. And number three is the financial performance. Because of the market conditions, as I explained earlier, they were not able to achieve profitability in the region. So based on this, what we can see is that when you are entering into a new market and it's highly competitive, what you need to consider is to understand the competition landscape, understand the market conditions, and understand the financial implications before entering a new market. And you also need to develop a strong understanding of the local culture and consumer behavior in the target market. Invest in building a strong brand and reputation in the target market, as well as be prepared to make adjustments to the business models in order to succeed. So the first two use cases upon Uber and also Groupon, you can see developing a strong local culture, adapting to that local culture is actually very pivotal for you to be successful in the region. So, but the last case study I'd like to share is on FlexPort. This is a successful expansion story, right? So FlexPort is a US-based supply chain startup that has expanded into Southeast Asia in recent years. They provide cloud-based platform that helps businesses manage their global supply chains. And they have offices in Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, as well as Indonesia. So why have they selected Southeast Asia? It's because it has been proven to be an attractive location for a lot of their customers. And they have diversified their supply chains to include new suppliers throughout the region, but challenges still remain. And many countries in this region do not have the physical infrastructure or the labor market necessary to support the manufacturing on scale that China historically has. And this results in the shippers encountering port and road congestion, as well as restricted trucking areas leading to delays in their supply chain. And how FlexPort has managed to circumvent around this is that they have been able to adapt its platform to meet the needs of businesses in the region by developing a strong understanding of the regulatory environment in Southeast Asia. So with that understanding alone, on top of so many other factors, you can see that FlexPort has managed to go into Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia, markets that not just one, not just two, but four markets in Southeast Asia, right? So that basically sums up the presentation I have for today. I'm open to any Q&As. I'm open to any conversation. So Rajiv, over to you.
Yeah, Mubiin, that was really great. Now we just open the floor for the participants to ask any of their questions. If you can't unmute, you can just put it in the team chat, or you can just unmute and ask the question out. I think we already have a couple in the chat box. So starting with Glennis. Glenn's question is there any limitation on startup stage to qualify for such a market entry program? Are we looking for growth stage startups, or those which are in ideation or prototyping stage also fine?
Okay, thanks, Sean. So Glennis, based on your question, limitation on startup stage to qualify for market entry, typically we don't limit. So if you notice in the slide that we shared earlier, when it comes to experience and partners, we do cover from startups all up the way to scale-ups, SMEs, corporates, even government, right? We work with everyone. But when it comes to for example, you were asking when it comes to taking, are you looking to take growth stage startups or those in ideation, prototyping are also fine. So these kind of companies, typically what we would advise is to actually find product market fit first, right? Because if you are looking to prototype and if you are looking to scale, I wouldn't say scale, to start this off in, let's say, Singapore or Malaysia, it would take a lot of work depending on the product, because your product, what you think might work in your home country might not work in the market that you're looking at. So there really it really consists of a lot of factors on how you want to proceed with this, right?
Yeah, Aditya Raj is also asking, when comparing bureaucratic barriers to entry, which market would you suggest would be the better out of the three, Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore?
All right. So being a Malaysian myself, I will be very frank without bias. Obviously, Singapore is the easiest market to go into because Singapore's bureaucracy is much more clearer. It's very much a straight cut. But the Singapore market is highly competitive, right? And it's very, very saturated. So going into Singapore, it's not a problem. Setting up there is not a problem. But when it comes to finding clients, finding customers, you are competing with a lot of companies that are already very mature. So it depends on your solution. But Malaysia, for example, Malaysia has a very more or less easy way to do things as well. When it comes to setting up business in Malaysia, dealing with bureaucratic barriers. But when it comes to dealing with government, for example, or even corporates, the conversion time could take a while as to compare to Singapore, because when it comes to speed of execution between Singapore and Malaysia and so Thailand, I would say Singapore would rank first, followed by Thailand and then Malaysia. Reason being is that Malaysia is also operating on different engines, I would say, to the extent that if you approach a Malaysian entity such as a government or corporate, it could take them some time to respond back to you and not at the speed that you are expecting.
Yeah, we have another question from Veena. Question is, what do you think is the biggest data formatting or mapping pain point for e-commerce companies in Southeast Asia? For example, do they find it cumbersome to get data into predefined formats to enable processing by downstream apps or for upload on other portals such as marketplaces?
Donna, what do you think is the biggest data point for different formats? Okay, so if I understand your question correctly, when it comes to e-commerce companies, trying to identify the pain points for formatting and mapping the biggest data formatting. Okay, so this comes to how they manage their data, right? If I understand correctly. So when it comes to e-commerce companies, it varies because we have quite a number of e-commerce companies in Malaysia itself, ranging from the small one to the big ones. So they use different solution providers. Some use their own in-house, some outsource. But the pain points, I would say, is in a matter of how accurate the data are, right? And how can they actually monetize on the data? Because data formatting, mapping pain point, I'm not exactly sure or certain what you're trying to ask here, because it's a bit too vague for me. But I hope what I asked, what I answered, matches what you were asking. But if I didn't, feel free to refine the question a bit more.
Yeah, Veena, if you could elaborate more on the question. Until then, let's move to the next question by Tarun. So he's asking whether they can sell remotely, how much presence is required in the country that they expand to.
Okay, so selling remotely is not an issue, but it's best to find a local partner. It can be a system integrator, it can be a distributor or reseller to work with locally. Typically, because also when it comes to software solutions, for example, right? If you're planning to sell to an enterprise or to a corporation, they usually require, or they would request for, an on-site support team, right? So meaning that if you work with local partner, then your local partner could also provide the support services that is required by the local clients.
All right. Pankaj has a question. So, Indian companies are not looked favorable compared to US or European companies. So, let us know what kind of perception medium tech companies have in these markets.
Okay, so Indian tech companies in Southeast Asia, the perception itself, I say it's a bit neutral. As I said earlier, right, Southeast Asia has always been neutral grounds. But the honest perception when it comes to India as a country itself, it's always been seen as uh, a country that has a lot of developers, right? So in terms of solutions, I would say the appetite is there, but it depends on what kind of solutions that you have as well. Because certain products or services can fit, whereas certain others cannot.
No, but what my point is that if they have a choice between two companies, one is say from United States and same an Indian company, but they're registered in the United States, and one company which is registered in India. I'm talking of the medium company.
Got
Now,
it.
there is a very high tendency to work with a company which has, say, like a registered office in United States or in Europe or in UK. You know, so that
Yeah.
one, and I'm not talking of the big brands. You know, like Infosys and Cognizant, and these are very big brands. Everyone knows these brands. I'm talking of like the mid tier or a small tier IT services company which has a niche. So how are they will be looked upon in these markets?
Got it. Okay, so when it comes to Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand, essentially the preference in terms of where the company is from used to be a priority, but now it's more in terms of the cost itself. So if you provide a cost advantage compared to your competitors from US or Europe, then there is no issue there.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, so the next question we have from Sagar. So, in your current portfolio of startups that you are partners with for market entry, are there any startups of similar nature and solution? If so, how do you manage that?
Okay, so to be very frank, there have been some of our clients that have more or less similar solutions, but obviously we manage, number one, of course, we have the NDAs with the client, so we are not at liberty to disclose or to share any of the approaches, right? But however, when it comes to what the clients want and the sector that they serve, so far there haven't been any overlaps, right? So I'll give you an example. One client provides mobile payment solutions, right? And they are looking to work with financial institutions. They are looking to work with manufacturers. But another one who is also doing mobile payment solutions, they are looking more towards getting more users, right? Onboarding more users on board. So it's different focus. But also,
Yeah.
sorry, Sean. Also to add, in case I wasn't clear on that. But for instance, let's say if there are two companies who offer the exactly same thing and they want the exact same outcome, what we would do is we would still provide the same services, but to different, I would say to different prospects.
The next question we have from Andrew. So, in US and Europe, many people mainly rely on LinkedIn and email directories for business development. But of course, these approaches may not work as well in Southeast Asia. What are your thoughts, and what would you recommend as the best approach to business development? Would it be via partners, building your own local team, or any other method?
Okay, Andrew, as you rightly pointed out, in Southeast Asia, the decision makers typically do not engage on LinkedIn. They prefer to stay behind the scenes, and it's hard to catch them publicly. Even if you do, it's hard to get their contact card or their name card, right? So in terms of recommendation of best approach for BD in Southeast Asia, Number one, if you are not in the market yourself, it's best to work with a local partner, right? Setting up a local team might be costly, but if you can do that, that's good. Number two is, of course, referrals from your partners or from your network, right? But how we have find it effective is that we actually run a couple of events to engage. So these provide us as a lead gen avenue, essentially like what IncubateHub has been doing, like for today, for instance, right? If you can bring up a topic that's interesting enough, depending on who's your target audience, then you could easily get some context from them. It doesn't have to be the decision makers, but business development at the end of the day is relationship building. So you need to build that upwards. So a manager will be attending the event, but you want to talk to their C-suite, right? So you would need eventually to build up that relationship, because why I advocate for this is typically people will assume, okay, I talk to the decision maker, then straight away everything is done, I can close the deal. But they often forget that even when the decision maker or the C-suite says yes, the ones that are executing at the working level. And if the working level does not have a relationship with you, they can make it very, very hard for you to progress.
Andrew has another question. So, how do you recommend companies address the corruption issues that you mentioned earlier?
Okay, so this one is a bit sensitive, but to be very frank with you, when it comes to corruption, we ourselves, we avoid any underhand dealings or corruption directly. We don't lobby. So when it comes to corruption, typically we take a step back. When it comes to any requests for coffee money, for any sort of side income from the prospect, we typically turn them down. Reason being is this could eventually bite you back in the ass. And how we would recommend our clients to avoid this is to find another angle. Because, for example, if you were to engage in a corruption dealing with a government, for example, and during audits, if you get flagged, then you would immediately lose the contract and be penalized.
We have a question from Prithvi. So, can you elaborate on the onboarding and growth strategy undertaken for startups which are, say, 2 years old?
Can you elaborate on onboarding and growth strategy? Undertaken for startups which 2 years. So meaning that the startup is 2 years old and elaborate on onboarding and growth strategy. So again, this is very vague. It depends on the product and services, because it's not a one-size-fits-all solution or one-size-fits-all approach.
We have a question from Sarvanan. So Sarvanan's asking, if localization is the key for growth of companies in Singapore or Thailand, what would be your suggestion for these startups in India on how to handle this?
So like I mentioned earlier, if you're looking to set up there, Singapore is an easier market for you to set up there. However, Thailand, similar to some countries in Southeast Asia, they prefer to do business with locals, right? So it's best if you can find a local partner to work with to help you sell the product. So at least on your end, you can focus on the product development and let your local partner drive the revenue for the specific market.
Yeah, we have a question from Indu. How would the engagement with BlackStorm work?
So typically BlackStorm, we work we work several models, right? So I prefer not to share in terms of the commercials here. That is something that we can explore further with a separate conversation. So, but typically we work in phases. So that if directly with our clients on a one-to-one basis, we would run a 100 days program, we call it. So within 100 months, we will prepare you to enter the market that you're looking at. We will also find you local partners, right? We will pair you up with a local partner. So those are to be done within 100 days. And then the subsequent phases will be in terms of setting up, in terms of finding POCs for you to test out your traction in the region, in the country. And then phase 3 will be in terms of scaling up your business.
We have another question from Andrew. What approach would you recommend to find suitable business development partners?
What approach you recommend to find? So this question is a good question, right? Because a lot of people say they can do sales, they can do BD, but people forget that sales and BD are totally two different things. And BD here is more of a lead gen basis, whereby sales is more to sales, selling of products and services, right? BD, look at it as more of a relationship manager as well for you to maintain that partnership. And the approach that, one of the approaches that I would recommend in terms of finding a suitable business development partner is actually to have a conversation with them and understand how do they engage with prospects, right? Do they go blindsidedly and just hard sell everything and just tell, go on LinkedIn, go to events and just say, hey, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I want to sell to you? Then these are not good business development partners to have. Reason being is that in Southeast Asia, as I mentioned, it's more towards relationship building, right? How you know them, when did you know them, how often you meet up with them. So these are the kind of things that you need to build. So over time, if you're looking for a business development partner, you also need to remember that these people are also responsible and will be your anchor in that market. So you also need to trust them when they are out doing their BD work. So it's more on your preference as well on selecting the partners.
Yeah, Pankaj has two questions. So the first one is Thailand and Indonesia have a language barrier. How do we tackle that, or how do we handle that? And his second question is basically, how do you find Vietnam as a market from a business development perspective?
Got it. So Thailand, to be fair, I'll bundle up everything into one. So Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam, more or less all three of them face language barriers, especially, for example, in this instance, Indian companies, right? Reason being is that, like I mentioned earlier, Thailand, Indonesians and Vietnamese prefer to work with their own local people or people who speak their local language. So the way to circumvent this is, number one, either you work with a local partner, or number two is if you set up a team, hire local people, right? Hire local people to front it first. So build that trust in the market, build that trust for your company, for your product, for your brand, and then from there, subsequently, if you decide to hire or to have some of your staff from India to go into that market, then go ahead. But you need to hire local first.
Yeah, just one more thing. You haven't covered about Philippines, because Malaysia and Philippines are the two largest economies where in the largest number of English speaking people. So they have an advantage for Indian companies. But I didn't see Philippines on your go-to-market strategy. Any reason for that?
So for BlackStorm, we focus only on Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand. So the rest of the markets, it's not that we don't want to go into, but it's more towards a strategic decision, right? So reason being is Indonesia is extremely hard to get into because they are hyper localized, right? Vietnam, we do not go into ourselves because Vietnam has had some histories in terms of IP issues, right? Meaning they have some of the companies I have worked with have faced issues whereby some of their Vietnamese clients have replicated their solutions, right? So it's more of a copyright issue in Vietnam. Philippines, again, I think because one of the issues I raised was bureaucracy and corruption. So that is in Philippines, but that does not mean these markets are not good to go into, right? This is more of a strategic decision from our end. We do have network there. but we do not want to say things that we cannot deliver. So hence why we focus on Singapore, Malaysia, and Thailand, where we are best at.
Yeah, but just to add to it, so only when you work with the government client, you come across bureaucracy or corruption, whatever. But when you work with enterprise, then it's a straightforward deals, right? Because there is no corruption there. Because you go on the basis of your merit. That's what my assumption. I hope I am correct.
As much as I like to share more, it can be a bit sensitive to further reasons, but I'm happy to have a separate conversation with you on this, Pangchat.
Sure.
Okay.
We'll be keeping this floor open for another couple of minutes. If anyone else has any other questions, you can maybe unmute and ask as well.
Just one last question is, how much money do we have to spend on marketing? Suppose you are spending $100 on sales. So do you think you have to do marketing first and then build the sales engine, or along with your sales you build the marketing engine in these markets, especially on the GTM side?
Okay, so it needs to be hand in hand, but obviously you will be burning a lot of marketing first. It depends on your solution. If you are looking at a B2C solution,
we are doing B2B only, not B2C.
Okay. So if a B2B solution, your marketing wouldn't be that heavy because it's primarily on SEO and SEMs. And it's very targeted to certain sectors that you are servicing, right? So that's one. Number two, you are asking, should it be done parallel with sales? I would say yes, because at the end of the day, sales engagements, either you close the deal or otherwise, it is still marketing, meaning that people will still learn about your solution.
Gotcha.
Hi, Sandeep here. I have one question. I don't know whether this was answered because I joined late. See, we are a company, we are a product-based company into providing solution for healthcare IT. We provide the clinic and hospital management solution. So today we have a presence in India with more than 700 installations. So now we are looking to go international market. So I would need some advice, like whether we need to move to the IP is now for the Indian market for the company that we have in India. So if we what would be the right choice? Like if we set up an office in Singapore to move the IP there, or can it be a shared IP? Will you be able to advise on that? How generally companies operate?
Okay. Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay. So when it comes to expanding into Southeast Asia, right? Typically we practice within BlackStorm. We tell our clients that we practice this concept whereby we call Sing Matai, right? It sounds Chinese, but it's not. Sing Matai means Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand. So the reason for this is because when it comes to Southeast Asia, a lot of companies will always want to go to Singapore first. And it makes sense because Singapore has always been known as the market to go into in Southeast Asia. But whenever a company sets up in Southeast Asia, it's it's mostly for PR, branding, optics. It's a bit hard to get market share, again, because it's saturated, right? So usually we would help our clients then to expand into Malaysia. Why Malaysia? Because Malaysia, despite the weak currency, it's cheaper to operate, right? So even if you set up in Singapore, but you are hiring from Malaysia, it's cheaper to hire someone from Malaysia than someone from Singapore, right? So we push them to Malaysia, hire from Malaysia, and then get POCs or pilots in Malaysia. So at least Malaysia itself, in terms of population, if you want Singaporeans, if you want Indonesians, Thai, Philippines, Vietnamese, Indians, Chinese, it's a melting pot, right? Malaysia is very racially diverse. So similar, if it's a B2B solution, you can test the market within Malaysia itself. So Malaysia is more of a testing ground. But from Malaysia itself, you cannot make a lot of money because it's because in terms of currency, we are not that strong compared to Singapore. Right? So Malaysia is a testing ground. And then from Malaysia, we will then advise you to go to Thailand. Why? Because Thailand, the currency is stronger, and the market is much more receptive when it comes to adopting, and it's much more faster moving.
Okay.
So that's why we focus on Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and setting up companies in these three countries is relatively easy and straightforward.
Okay, so in that case, instead of Singapore, can we look at Thailand directly, setting up a company in Thailand directly, or identifying a partner in Thailand directly instead of going to Singapore? Because Singapore, as you say, it's a saturated market, so why we have to go through Singapore? It can be from India to Thailand directly, right? So
yeah, it's not a problem. Again, it depends on what your objectives are, what kind of
okay,
product you're bringing in, and then depending on the market research outcome.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, since we'll be closing soon, a final question from Indu. Would BlackStorm also help with the initial POCs? And how would this engagement model be with BlackStorm? Will it be initiated through IncubateHub?
Okay, so for the POCs part, we do not guarantee for POCs because again, at the end of the day, it's dependent on the product itself, right? But what we do help is to facilitate the conversation. We can help in terms of finding prospects for POCs. Engagement wise, with BlackStorm, the initiative with IncubateHub, I think, Sean, this is on you. This is a question for you.
Yeah, so we'll be releasing further details on this engagement model possibly in the next couple of days or maybe in the next week. But yes, for Indian startups that will be going through India, we'll be the point of contact with BlackStorm, and this would be initiated via IncubateHub.
Yes. So another thing that I would like to share is that I think after the call, Sean will be sharing my email to everyone as well. So feel free to reach out to me. Another thing that I like to share is that BlackStorm, if the companies are also looking at exploring the market first, right? Just to come in, for example, come to Malaysia, meet some of the key stakeholders, understand is there appetite for the solution before you decide to invest more. We also do run a group immersion. So this is something that we are exploring with IncubateHub as well. So that sets basically like a precursor for you to just check the market out first before you commit, because we also don't want you to decide, oh, I want to go into Malaysia, I want to go to Singapore, Thailand, and suddenly it's like, oh, I burned, I don't know, $500,000, but I can't do business here. So it's good for you to gauge first, and then find out what's the appetite like in the market that you're focusing on, and then from there we can work further together.
And with that, we'll just come to a close with this session. Firstly, thank you very much, Mubiin, for conducting this webinar with us. I think Rajiv had to drop off in a last-minute emergency, so he's not here. So I'd just like to tell thank you to Mubiin for taking on this session, and for everyone who joined, attended, and made it a really interactive session. Thank you once again for all the questions. Looking forward to interacting once again further. And if you have any other questions as such, I've dropped my email and Mubiin's email on the chat, so you can feel free to reach out to us at any time.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, thank you all. Bye.